Welcome, Darklings, to Season 3 of the Reign of Blood podcast. I'm Ember, one of your hosts, here to introduce you to the shadowy depths of what hopes to be our most sinister season yet. This season, your unholy trinity of organizers and hosts, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and myself, have entirely way too much fun with the Summer of Stabs, our 80s horror-themed series that promises to be both educational and thrilling. Our aim is to explore the macabre beauty that lies in the shadowed, or maybe not so shadowed, spaces of desire. Leading up to Reign of Blood Nightfall, our advanced Halloween extravaganza, we'll be discussing topics such as embodied and informed consent, risk mitigation, and other helpful tips, ensuring that every prick, slice, and puncture is as thought through as it is sensational for you. We'll also continue interviewing sharps enthusiasts from around the world to find out what makes the blood-loving heart tick. And maybe we'll talk Miss K into recording some more horror meditations for us. Join us as we explore the eerie, the edgy, and the exquisitely sharp. This is Reign of Blood, where the macabre meets the magnificent, and the only limit is your imagination, risk profile, and informed consent. Let the Summer of Stabs begin. But first, a content warning. This podcast is not suited for individuals who are not legal adults, are not interested in heavier BDSM practices, who are presently having severe mental or relationship health concerns, or who do not already understand basic BDSM practices regarding consent, ethics, risk mitigation, etc. Topics may include things like mental health issues, social issues, injustice, blood and sharks, of course, medical trauma, medical issues, trauma of various types, and more. Listener discretion is heavily advised.
Hey, my amazing sharps lovers. I am back, and it's Miss Kitten for Reign of Blood, and you are joining us to chat about sharp things. And in my dungeon today, virtually, I have Polyplantmom. And I hope I got that name all right with all those P's and the alliteration. And I'm very grateful for this amazing human joining us today, and for her offer of education. And she's coming to join us on Summer of Stabs. So first of all, from our team, thank you so much for putting up with our chaos and making time in your schedule to see us and to chat to us. We're very grateful, and we're all very excited to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be working with you all too. I've been following Reign of Blood since we started, since you all put things together.
Yeah, it was a bit crazy, but I think the sharps community it feels like home to me. It felt like coming home recently. It felt like I've been at boarding school and I'd come back home. So I'm always excited to talk about sharp things. But we weren't all born kinky, and there obviously was a path. So maybe you can just share a little bit how you went from being one of those vanilla muggles that they had a muggle life, and you found sort of the more kinky dark side.
I'm not gonna lie, I was really blessed to figure it out pretty young. I think the first large dungeon I walked in, I was 19. And it was massive. It was in Seattle. And I just knew pretty young that pain was a big part of what I enjoyed. Ironically, I didn't even think about sharps until about 3 years ago. I had already been playing with all these other kind of dangerous, fun things. And I had bottomed for someone just because I love piercing. I mean, I'm heavily tattooed, heavily pierced. And they were like, would you be interested? I tried it once and immediately knew I needed to do it to other people. Um, so like I said, I've only been doing needles probably 3 years, but the artistic expression that I could use with needles was so different than a lot of the other things I was doing.
I love that, and I have to say it's always about one prick and we're hooked. So I think
Absolutely. I don't know what it is either. It's like the second I had it happen to me, I knew how amazing it would be for other people. I feel like the space you hit with that pain is so different. than a lot of other types of pain.
I think for me, it's a clarity. There's like if I do impact or I do, there are other ways to hit a good space, but they also involve quite a lot of trauma, and quite a lot of process. There's something about a needle where the presence is automatic. That white noise just switches off as the first prick goes in, and by the third prick, nothing else matters. And not that I'm not conscious for the other things, it's just less important, and there's no more swirling and noise in my head. So I hear that. I love that. You say you are pretty heavily tattooed and you've enjoyed body modification? Tell me a little bit about how you found that out, and tell me about your first tattoo.
Oh Lord. So I like I said, I knew pretty young that piercing was something I was interested in. I think I got my first one at 15, you know, friend doing it in a bathroom kind of levels, you know. But as I got older, I knew I wanted to modify. So I, when talking about tattoos, you know, when we start, we always start small, right? But at this point, I have my armpits completely tattooed. I have my knees tattooed, places that are very painful and not typical, because to me, that experience is worth it. Like I enjoy the pain and I don't want to say survival, but the pushing through and being able to kind of create art out of pain. And that's a lot of what I do in general.
I love the idea of creating art out of pain. And I think when you're creating it on a living canvas, there's it's more than just the picture. The picture becomes 3D, but the picture also then has this journey, because that as the body heals, and the body and the skin as a canvas is just so phenomenal. It goes through such a beautiful process, and it's just such an incredible organ, and it's able to sort of change and morph and add to the beauty of the art. So I really relate to creating art out of pain so intently. I absolutely love that. Tell me a little bit about your piercing as a top, and what you really enjoy doing, and what that looks like for you.
So I think most people know me for the artistic stuff just because that's pretty and I can take a photo of it. But I really enjoy playing with pain and needles. So I do a lot of impact over needles, a lot of combining it with other things. Because, like you said, the way that the skin works is just amazing and fascinating. Watching it bounce back or be able to take certain things, amazing. As a top, I really like the feeling of being under someone's skin. We don't get that experience in almost anything else we do.
I love that. I'd like to explore the impact a little bit. It's not something I've had huge experience with as a top or as a bottom. I've tried it a little bit. I think the most I've done with impact over needles is kind of put a plaster over the needles, like a clear dressing, and then use a spatula to smack them. What does impact over needles look like for you? And yeah, what's your favorite way to do it?
So obviously everybody's risk profile is different. Me and my bottom, I prefer to punch, slap, hit needles. Obviously that's risky at the top. So I don't recommend anybody just start with that. Usually if people are trying to learn, I say, you know, cover it, obviously. Canes are an amazing way to start because it gives you a lot of control over those small areas that we have, you know, under skin. Um, I think electro has been really fun doing near needles. Um, you can combine, we're doing fire right now, obviously for Rain of Fire, but I've even seen people really combine impact with fire and needles, which is fascinating. I know, right? Isn't that wild?
Right,
I
how does
can't
that
imagine the
work?
heat. I can't imagine the heat, but they don't cover,
Okay.
obviously. To me, that's a big thing. I want it to be covered up, especially we're probably going to get pretty bloody if we're beating it for a good amount of time. I'd say 20 to 30 minutes is usually what I can get before we need to start pulling them out because the bruising is going to get
Oh,
pretty,
wow, that's pretty intense. That's
yeah,
pretty
but it's
cool.
gorgeous. I love seeing the bruises after. When they're in, it doesn't typically bruise as heavy. Now that could just be my bottoms, but once they come out, the bruising is usually pretty fast.
Oh wow, that I have to see a picture of that. That sounds absolutely incredible. My poor bottoms are now in for it. You do realize that you're putting very bad thoughts in this kitten's head.
I'm telling you, the second you can smack it, I feel like that feeling is the greatest thing. Is just pop.
I've done it with a spatula. I've always been a bit nervous to use things over needles, and I'm only now starting to explore like the sensual side of trying to make, and when I say sensual, I mean experiencing a sensation. I don't mean pleasurable sensations. I just want to clarify that because I keep saying that I do sensual. I'm a wholesome sensualist, but that does not that does
It
not
doesn't
mean
translate. Yeah.
yeah, we're spelling wholesome with an H. There's no W in my wholesome. So but I think that you can take that pain and you can tailor it in so many ways. So even and I think because the skin has been penetrated, it's so present, and it's listening. It's like a whole like the entire schoolroom is listening and focused on you. That's the body feels like as soon as you penetrate it with a needle. So if you use anything, if you use wax, if you use even just a vibrator over those needles, it's absolutely insane. I'm terrified of electricity. I've knocked
Mm.
myself out by accident with my
Oh,
own electrical playthings. So I'm literally like I have a lot of CBT bottoms who love it, and I think that I have more adrenaline when they're experiencing the electricity and I'm giving it. It's not something I enjoy. So I've never tried electricity over needles. I've been too scared. I've been too scared that I'm gonna zap myself instead of the bottom. But yeah, I love adding things to it because I think the body's on such high alert that the body's response is so intense that it's just a totally different sensation. So definitely gonna try your punching.
it is, like I said, it's almost weird to watch. I'm sure when people see me seen like that, it's bizarre. But I do a lot of primal impact anyway. And so it just kind of felt natural. Like if we were going to be using these so often, why not incorporate all these other things with it?
So would you just do it over a design, or how would you set it? How would you set the scene up for the impact?
So it really depends on what the bottom wants too. So my submissive, when we started this journey 3 years ago, I mean, we were doing 5, 6 needles at a time, right? Now we can get up to 150, depending on preparation, right? So if they're really wanting something that is more pain based, not necessarily needle based, we might only do 5 on each thigh, right? And then cane the thighs or something like that.
Okay,
You can do it over a design, but because of the multiple pokes, that can be difficult too.
okay,
I like to have control over where I'm hitting, and if we have really tiny little gaps in those needles, it can be kind of hard.
okay.
Um, yeah, but usually it really doesn't take many for people to get that full impact sensation. Um, because again, we're under their skin. It's just it's so
Yeah.
different.
I love that. We have their attention and we have penetrated their brain and they are listening. And the whole body is waiting to receive more information. I think that that's fantastic. I have a very beautiful image in my head. So now I have to go this weekend when my bottom comes on Saturday, and I have to report back and tell you how it goes.
Oh, now I'm curious.
No,
Yeah.
I'm very curious about this, and I have the perfect cane as well. Um, were they
And I
quite
think
difficult? Yeah.
you all have talked to Caroline, right?
Yes.
'Cause
Yeah.
we do impact over the quills too,
Oh
which is really
wow. Okay. And no risk of breaking, or what is the risk mitigation or something like that?
so I've never had one break. I think it is pretty difficult to break one. Um,
Okay.
and my understanding is if it were to break, we just still excise it from the body. And typically it can be done. I've caned pretty heavily over those too and not had any issues. Now, everybody's risk profile is different. We understood, is it possible that I hit this and it shoots off? Yes, it is completely possible. But I think playing with the flexibility, the quills are flexible almost like needles are, where we bend them and there's some give.
Okay.
You've dealt with needles so many times. I mean, we rarely have a needle break, right? I don't think I've ever had a needle snap in half. And I think it just goes to show how much they can take as far as impact.
I do quite a lot of bondage with needles. Bending a limb and then strapping the limb, like the arm up, and then using that, and then putting a weight in the hand or something like that, and then adding that to a play, because I'm super lazy with rope, and it's much easier to use needles for bondage than it is to use rope. So I've actually pulled the needles out and they've bent in the skin. They've actually
Mm,
bent it like a 90-degree from the weight of the human being pulling against them, and the
really?
weight in their hands. So I think it is possible to bend them, but even in that situation, I've never ever in all of my practice, touch wood, had a needle break on me at all. So
Mm,
and I've put them under. We've done some photographic stuff with wings where we've had people in hula hoops and hanging from the ground and stuff like that. So they've been pretty much, like intense movement and stuff on the needles, and they've managed to survive. Obviously, that's also done with calculated risk, and we understand that we're taking bigger risks, and we're looking at both the bottom and the top's risk profile for that, and we're also doing it with a team setup, so there is support, and it is definitely negotiated. I'm not suggesting to any of my listeners that you try any of these things without proper negotiations or proper risk mitigation. But I think what I am saying is that, they're pretty tough and they do last. We don't get quills here in South Africa. Well, we do, but they are, we have an African porcupine, and our
oh,
porcupine has super long
yeah, the
quills
big
and they don't
ones.
have
Yeah.
barbs. So if we want to put them in needles, we have to use them like feathers on the back of a hub. They don't stick in the skin. So we haven't been lucky enough to try the quills. So desperate still to get hold of some of Caroline's quills and give it a go.
Yeah, I think they're really fun as an addition to just normal sharp stuff too. We incorporate them with needles all the time because they, how a needle, we're basically laying it under the skin. The beautiful thing about the quills is we're just kind of putting them in, right? So
Okay.
they can accentuate what you're already building or designing too.
Okay, stunning. Um, and you spoke a little bit about obviously preparing your bottoms for something like an impact scene, that there is a negotiation and that there is a communication. What does that look like a little bit? I mean, you don't have to go into all the detail, but what are the important things for you and the green flags and the feedback that you get from your bottoms?
So luckily, like I said, I'm in a DS relationship. So we have gotten to the point of negotiation that it's pretty, straightforward. But I do pick up play quite a bit too. And I actually require people to fill out a form now that basically asks you, your kink philosophy. Do you understand prick and rack? Do you understand that there is risk in what we're doing? And then I typically from that form will talk to them more about kind of what their goal is, what their experience is. I've turned people down if I feel like they don't understand the risk truly, um, because I think a lot of people expect the tops to just do all that. So they don't need to know the risk, which is fascinating to me because you're letting me do things like, get under your skin or set you on fire or all these things that are very dangerous. So usually it starts with, can you fill this form out real fast? It's only like 5 questions, and it really is more like a edge play background. Tell me your edge play background, and then we
Okay.
can go from there. If they've never done it, that doesn't like exclude them from playing with me. I've had people who've never had it done, and I'll say, okay, we'll do 1, 2, make sure everything's going to be okay. I know that some people have really strong physical reactions. So even talking up front about, okay, what does it look like if you have a strong physical reaction? I'm probably going to get a blanket. We need to know where you're going to sit. We need to know who's with you, right? All of these things that are pretty important. Now, I've had people in negotiation be concerned that their um, medical history be a problem. And I'm sure we've all probably experienced that as tops. So sometimes negotiation includes what that looks like, risk mitigation as far as health stuff as well, obviously. But
That's a
on the flip side of that, I also really am a strong proponent of HIPAA. So I even include things in my negotiation, like, is there anything that you don't feel comfortable disclosing They just have to say yes or no, and then I can decide on my risk profile moving forward.
What is, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you a very African question, but what is HIPAA?
Oh, so it's our Health Privacy Act,
Oh,
basically.
okay.
Yeah. So, medical doctors, I'm a therapist, so HIPAA is very important in what I do.
Okay.
I never want to make somebody feel like they have to share medical records with me. I'm a stranger. Um, I know I need it as part of my negotiation. I completely agree that it is a great idea for them to tell me, but I also recognize that everybody has personal autonomy related to their disorders as well. Um, I, when we originally talked, I think you had brought up EDS.
Yeah.
I would want somebody to disclose that, but can I require it? No. Um, I would rather ask things like, is there any medical considerations I should have? You don't have to go into detail. And if it's something that I don't know them well enough or I don't think it's going to fit, right? If they are not comfortable sharing anything, then I'll probably back out. Um, but I do feel like there's this movement among tops that they feel like we need to know everything about our bottoms, which of course we need to know a good chunk of it. But for me, pickup play, right? Am I expecting somebody who I've just met that night to go into details about their six diagnoses? Probably not. Like they're probably not going to do that either, right? I would like them to, but I can't assume that people are going to share that information either. And I feel like we see that a lot in negotiation. Well, you need to tell me your medical issues. Yes, but we can't force that. We can't um, essentially out somebody's disability. And I think that that's something that's really kind of a hot topic with tops,
I
whether or
love
not.
that I love that you brought this up. It's definitely like you're making me really question my own negotiation form and my own way of asking. So is there a better way of asking the question? Because the information that I'm requiring is to protect both of us and
Mhm.
also to make sure that we have a contingency plan in place. So if you have something that could cause a seizure or that could cause excessive bleeding or that could really be relevant to the scene at hand, and you don't disclose that willingly and you withhold the information, my natural instinct is to almost feel violated in the situation should it go wrong. So I don't want to feel like that. I never, like, kink is for fun. Like, I'm literally doing this so that you can have a good time and I can have a good time. I never want to end up feeling violated. So how do we pose that question to people so that you don't necessarily have to tell me your whole diagnosis, but that you are able to identify the risks so that we can mitigate them, so that we're preparing the scene, both taking personal responsibility.
Yeah, like I said, I think a great way of doing that is saying something along the lines of, is there stuff you do not want to disclose? That's a yes or no
Okay.
question, right? They can say yes and then decide not to elaborate on that. I might ask in my edge play form, I think it specifically asks about, clotting disorders, things that would be pretty immediate. But with clients, I say clients, but with bottoms that are, say diabetic, that's a pretty common one, right? We know that doesn't necessarily exclude them from play, and they can disclose that to me, obviously. But if they can write in my edge play form, they understand the risks, they understand their own mental health, they understand their own physical health. That kind of goes back to our prick and rack.
Where
Because
they're taking the responsibility, they're owning their own shit, and they're saying this is mine, I'm looking after it, and I'm saying that in my today's budget I'm going to spend what I have and I'm going to face the consequences afterwards. It's pretty scary. Like our community is in my own hometown, our community is um alcohol is a lot of, the sort of social side of life here. Like 5 o'clock hits and everybody goes to the pub. Friday night, so who's having a barbecue and who's having the barbecue and beer type thing. We call it a braai. So every social situation here is alcohol fueled. So just to get kink spaces to To not have alcohol was a big step, or to have alcohol but encourage sober play was a big step forward, especially here because it's a financial thing as well. The club makes no money off the entry; they only make money off the drinks sold for the night. So the actual institutions don't want to change the process. So just to change the logic around let's play sober was the first step, and now it's sort of like let's play sober and be honest about how we're showing up. But I quite like the way you do it. And I sort of in the beginning, I wanted to ask you why you do it written, but I have a better idea in my head after listening to you chat that it's twofold. Number one, that they are actually thinking about the answer as they're writing it down, and number two, that you have it in writing and that there is some written consent about the whole thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I know in our lifestyle, like there's no legal upholding of something like that, a document like that. But to me, if I'm filling something out, I want to be honest as much as I can, and I think include on this sheet, you don't have to be experienced. You don't have to have all these things, but you've got to be honest. I need to know what we're doing. So I think having the written version is super handy too, because I can go back to it if I need to later. People's, roles change, people's experiences change, so even being able to have almost a log, right?
Yeah.
where we started at one place and we're moving forward. I think, especially with pickup play, it's a great idea to have some kind of written something. Just because we're in an environment that's so different. It's one thing if I'm at my home dungeon and we have time and things are, just a little easier to plan.
I like that. I pick up play is something I don't do. I'm autistic. I like to have everything negotiated a week in advance. I like to have every contingency plan. I like to have absolutely everything laid out. Like it's really important for me. I think secretly like admin is my kink. Like so everything for me is written. I like intent to align, and sometimes because it's hard for me to always understand somebody's intent in a spoken conversation, it's easier if I have it written. It becomes really important to me. And then I don't like to be hurried. I don't like to guess. So pick up play I'm not judging it at all. I think it's fantastic. But for me as a human being, it makes me a bit anxious and it makes me a bit nervous, and I don't do it. But when we do events and we're running sort of tastings, we have a consent card that we go through. But just making that consent card something that somebody would have to fill out would also take 5 minutes of the frenzy away from moving from one kink to another kink. So they're actually sitting down, they're actually breathing, because it's very easy to pass somebody off verbally, but it's not so easy to pass somebody off with a written word. So yeah, I really like that. You've added value to me today, and that's definitely something that I think we're going to add into our markets and buy a whole lot of pens, support the people selling pens in the community. But I think that's a great idea, and it's lovely to hear that as a top, you think that it's important that people are, number one, taking personal responsibility, but number two, that you're aligning intent with them. So I really like that, and I appreciated hearing that from you. Your bucket list for needles, what's still on it and what's next?
Oh God. Well, I feel like the Lobus is the standard, right? I have some of the lower ones, so always moving up. Right? Do you have a card? Where are you at?
I've done up until platinum.
Wow.
But
Okay.
I did it with CBT. So
Oh.
58 gauges in a penis is a lot of real estate planning. I feel like I should build skyscrapers after I did that. Personally, I've self-stabbed a silver. And I did it quite recently, just after Rain of Blood. I loved the experience, but I battled with the healing, and I found that, which is unusual for me. My self-care is super important to me, and I find it very empowering usually to care for myself. And I found that silver took a very long time to heal. So it was just from watching that process with my body. I think before I pierced the silver, I was super keen to still do gold this year, and it was kind of like it was sort of something that I was definitely going to do. But after watching my body struggle to heal a little bit, and the impact that the silver had on my body, I think I'm taking a bit of a backseat from a self-pierce point of view and gonna stick with my smaller digits for or my smaller needles for a while. And yeah, so but I've done I don't know if I'd be able to fit 75 needles in a penis.
Yeah,
As
I
8
think
gauge,
that might
like,
get a little tight. Yeah.
yeah, 50 was a big ask. I'm
Yeah,
gonna need
absolutely.
I'm gonna need to find a bigger penis. So if anybody's listening to this and you have, you have the real estate and you want to do it, I'm always keen to go for the 75 to 100 in the penis. But yeah, I think the low basses are beautiful, and I think it's really empowering to see people achieve them, especially that first one. For some
Yeah.
reason, when you have somebody who hasn't done a lot of needles and they're doing their basic for the first time, and they are preparing for it and then they achieve it, there's something really empowering about sharing that moment with somebody, and that's something that they're never going to forget. So I really do find that incredibly special. Yeah, and it's funny because um I was so committed to doing my gold this year, but I just my body's taken a long time to heal that, and it was interesting because my self care is very good, my off care is very good. It was just an interesting personal reflection on seeing those marks still there after all that time, and it wasn't as pleasing as I expected it to be. So I think I'm going to give it a bit of a gap before I try the gold.
We actually were on like a needle hiatus for the last 3 weeks. I usually seen with needles almost 2 times a week, every week. It's quite a bit. So we decided to take a gap right now because of healing. I mean, we're getting to the point where you have to take extended breaks just to heal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think like um I'm very proud of what my body did, and I don't think I realized the ask until afterwards. Like
Mm,
the actual experience for me was very pleasant. I loved every second of it. I didn't find it a difficult thing to do. It flowed very easily. It happened very quickly. It wasn't a difficult piercing. I didn't quite expect the aftercare to take so long. And I think I hadn't budgeted correctly for that. So I think I need to go back into my own head and just work around that. And I think those 8 gauges are going to do some damage.
that's interesting because I had a friend who wanted their basic lobus, and I'll never forget before we started, they were like, "Can you just throw in some bigger ones at the end?" And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. And we're getting to the end, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grab those bigger ones. And they were like, nope, never mind. And I think it's because in our head we see it and we're like, okay, we've had, so many. It's easy. We got this. And then it was in the moment realizing, oh, this is different. This is much more than we anticipated.
I think what was interesting for me with the 12 gauge is I've done quite a few silvers that I've pierced on other people. So it wasn't something, but I haven't ever put anything in my own body that was smaller than a 16. And
Mm,
more because in our country we don't get piercing needles very easily. So a box of piercing needles is like gold. They cost half a kidney. So you only get 4 in a lifetime. No, I'm kidding. But they're
yeah.
super expensive and they're super difficult to get, and the waiting period is probably like 6 months for an order. Like it's not something I can go to the shop and grab a box of piercing needles today. So the medical needles are different, and as you go down in the gauges, the bevel's super short on the medical needles, where the piercing needle, the bevel's super long. So 16 gauge on a surgical needle is frigging, that's hardcore. A 12 gauge with a beautiful long bevel is a beautiful feeling compared to the gouging yourself with the medical needles. So I think like I hadn't actually done anything less than a 16. So I think in my head, it took me a while to accept that I was going to do silver. And then I sat down, put 2 needles in, realized that it didn't feel anything like the medical needles, that it was really a lovely feeling, that I really was, you know, and found the actual piercing quite easy, that I actually expected the healing to be just as easy and didn't give my body enough credit and enough time. So I just interesting self-reflection, but definitely need to think about planning a better healing process for myself if I'm going to self-pierce the gold. And I think for me it's interesting. I find getting pierced by somebody else a lot more painful than piercing myself.
Oh, I can see that completely.
Yeah. So I
I
don't
can
know if it's
completely
just
see that.
because
So
you're
wait, you're saying you
concentrating.
all only have hypodermic needle access?
Well, we have piercing access. We have piercing access. There's a company that is about 1,000 kilometers away from me that I can order from online.
Wow.
And I'm probably paying trying to think of the equivalent in dollars, and my math is really bad at the moment. I'm probably paying 3 times what you guys are paying for a box of piercing needles.
Really?
Yeah. So,
I
but the
almost want to
weight,
send you some. That's so
yeah.
upsetting. I will send you some.
It's also something that I think, you know, like planning for the silver, like this box was like a box of needles that we bought, and then we bought 100 of them, and then we shared between 2 tops. A friend of mine who's a dom, and we sort of, I did her silver, and the idea was that the second half of that box would then be my silver. So they kind of sat on the shelf and looked at me for a long time. And I think in my head, I'd built them up to be this incredible feat. And then it was super easy to put in. And I was like, oh, this is nothing. And then didn't give it enough space to say that my body really needs that extra time to heal. And my skin's done an amazing job. And I've just gouged 50 holes in my leg that were bigger than what I normally do. And I need to be kinder to myself. So I just didn't plan enough aftercare, and I shortchanged myself in that situation. So I think before I do gold, I would definitely plan aftercare better.
I feel like that's something that happens a lot though with what we do. I don't know if it's just because of how it looks or what, but people kind of minimize the aftercare. I mean, I've even had people walk up and talk to us while we're in aftercare. And I think it's just because to them needles looks quick, right? They're in, they're out. I don't understand why this is such a big deal. And then I think that puts a lot of pressure on the bottoms to not understand how to take care of themselves either. I mean, I've been doing this for years and I don't even see people know what to wrap their legs in or, you know, safe ways to even expose it to things.
I worked with him. I was really lucky during Rain of Blood. Harold Cobb and I connected quite well. And I hadn't done any weaving, and he took my hand for a while and helped me do the double weaves and the triple weaves, and sent me some patterns and showed me how to do that. Um, and then he also said to me that I must ice the injury afterwards. And I am a sportsman, and what I do in my vanilla work involves a lot of injury repair, and ice is like a staple. And I can't tell you that in my entire life history of kink, I had never thought about taking an ice pack out and using an ice pack. So we did a testing thing for a while where we'd do 2 sets of piercings, one on each leg, and one leg we'd ice and one leg we wouldn't ice. And the healing on the ice leg um, is absolutely phenomenal, and how much it speeds it up and how much it aids it, and how much, you know, just seeing that from that simple act of icing it once or twice, and then as you sort of do more complicated pieces, or you're putting the skin under more tension with the weave, you're adding sort of more icing time. But just adding that into my aftercare process for myself and taking responsibility for that, the healing was phenomenal. Like I've really managed to help myself in the process. And it's interesting because I have a sports career. Like ice should be a staple, and it's not.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I totally recommend. Our skin is so pliable, and you see what it's like when we especially do ping buttons or things like that, the swelling that can happen. It makes perfect sense that we put ice on it, but for some reason, like I said, it's just not automatic for a lot of people. Like, to me, first aid is first aid, right? So if we're in first aid mode, we're in first aid mode. So we're going to start that from the very basic and move up, you know. But for other people, I think they don't realize the skin needs prepped in some way sometimes. Afterwards, even, you know, my bottom will get really dry spots from piercing. I don't know if that's the thing everybody gets. But like even being able to care for that kind of stuff for healing, so we're not getting scars. I know when we're dealing with big needles, I mean, we're taking chunks of skin, and I don't think people realize that. I mean, a 4-gauge needle, right? That's some serious stuff. An 8-gauge needle, decent size, you know? And it's fascinating that people don't view that as an open wound when it is. Like, we've essentially exercised a giant amount of skin out of your body.
It's interesting because if you speak to a piercer who's going to do a hook suspension with you, because in my community, the only people that you get to do a hook suspension would be a professional piercer. We don't have a community that does suspension like that. They would recommend, or they recommend for a suspension, that you wet heal it. So you treat it like an open wound and you use a wet plaster over it and you keep it covered for a certain amount of time and a certain amount of days. So it's interesting listening to that, and how that's often not brought back then into the kink play. I have to be honest, I've never put wet plasters on a penis that I've stabbed with 8 gauges. But we have taken very special care of it. But I do think a lot of that relates back for me in my journey in kink. I didn't know how to care for myself. I was always fine. So when somebody asked me how I was, I would just tell them that I was fine. And that was, whether I was fine or not, that was my answer, because it was uncool and not accepted to be anything but fine. So instead of saying, hey, I need a moment to go into X and Y for myself, or no, I don't have capacity to do this today, and taking the time out for that self-care, and making that self-care a skill, that didn't happen until I started playing in kink. So it was only when I was all of a sudden faced with the repair that needed to happen, partly because I wanted to do the thing again, especially with needles, that I needed to be empowered with my self-care. And I think a lot of the time with aftercare, when I ask a bottom what they need for aftercare and they tell me, oh, nothing, it's okay, they honestly think they need nothing, because that's what they've given themselves for the entire life. And I don't know if there's just a bias there, because that's kind of my independence. I didn't need anything and I was fine. But I don't think we allow ourselves that self-care. So I really think that part of the journey for me has been learning how to really care for myself, so that I can show up for a top or for one of my bottoms with examples of what aftercare looks like. So we have things to try. So I have things to bring to the table. But that took a while in my journey. That wasn't something that happened in the beginning. And I think that is, you've got to learn it. And these are all skills. And I think aftercare is a skill too. Like we just don't have it in our normal life.
Yeah. And I will say, I've noticed for this type of play, it feels like aftercare is different too, as a bottom and as a top. For me, like impact, just straight impact, flogging, whatever, is going to be a different headspace and different aftercare for me than if I'm doing 60 needles or 70 needles. And it's this intense design and I'm focused, and it's a very different environment. And so I think also I see with bottoms, they might be able to communicate aftercare for something they've done often, like impact. But then when I'm like, what's aftercare for needles? It's almost like, oh, I don't know. You know, because it is such a different field, I guess, different sensations.
I think also, like, so what I suggest with my bottoms is that they create, it's going to sound like kindergarten, but we create this pie chart where we have all these ideas. And in the beginning, your pie chart has 20 or 30 different pieces of pie. And as we go through them, we knock out some of them because some of them don't work or they're not applicable or they're not great, but they give us options to try. So the bottom can bring suggestions to the table so that we've got things that we can test drive. And then we can, by the end of the relationship, we have a pie chart for each other where there's only 5 or 6 pieces on, but those are solid pieces. We know that we like those flavors. We know that those flavors work for us, and we're able to pick them up and use them. And then, being able to swap those pie charts gives both of us the opportunity to help the other when they're very low at capacity. I also think that the way we ask, if somebody needs aftercare, is really different. Is really awkward. People don't like to tell you that they're not okay. So I have a number system, and we work on a capacity number system. So we have a number for emotional and a number for physical, because it's much easier for me to be honest with you and say I'm a 5 today than me to be honest with you and tell you that I'm not okay. So that check-in system, and we start that check-in system, like I said to you, everything is quite planned in my life. We start that check-in system a week before. So we're coming down to the day before needles. I know what their numbers are in the morning. I know what their numbers are in the afternoon. The morning of needles, I know what their numbers are. I'm checking again just before the scene. The numbers are obviously sky high at that point because nobody feels bad at that point. But then also I have an idea of what level of drop they're experiencing. And because I've checked in for a whole week before, I know what the numbers normally are on a Monday. So I have a comparison. If I don't think anybody is 10 on a Monday ever. Like, it's Monday. So it's always lower than you're going to be on a Friday. But I have some comparison and some understanding of what a normal rhythm looks like. And then I'm able to sort of recognize when somebody says to me they're a 5 today, if that is a normal 5 for a Monday, or if that is really impacted by the scene. And because I think it's hard for people to ask for help. And I also think sometimes the way we phrase help is difficult. If you're a super independent person, or if you're a super submissive person, asking for help can be really, really, really hard. And the better you know each other, the more you communicate, the easier it is to get to ask for those things. But sometimes service can be like, I have a couple of bottoms who really want to help me after a scene, and I fucking don't want any fucking help. Like, I don't want any help. Like, so
Don't touch anything.
Part of their aftercare is helping me clean up, and part of my aftercare is not having anybody in my fucking space and letting me do my own shit. But just aligning on that and qualifying that. But it's a communication thing, and I think it takes time.
I think it's great to have any of that tracking, like you being able to know a week up what it's like, and then the week after. It's a great idea. Like I said, with my form, it's so nice to be able to kind of track where people are at. Earlier on FetLife today, somebody had asked the question, how do tops and bottoms feel if they have to call red? Something like that. And I thought the responses were really interesting because to me, red will happen, right? That's what we do in our lives. I think to some degree, we're going to have somebody call red at some point. But if we're doing all this work beforehand, I think the odds of it happening decrease tremendously. If we're checking so many things, mood, physical, all of that stuff up front, I think it really translates well into aftercare later.
I think the red thing's super interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up. When I started off as a top, like in my community, the bottoms weren't encouraged to give the tops information. Like, you don't top from the bottom. You're a submissive and you have to shut up and take it. So if somebody calls red, it is a sign of the top's failure. And I don't align with that, because red for me is like a no. And I like red and I like no from the simple point of view. I like information. So the more information you can give me, I can stop doing the shit you don't like, and we can do shit that you like, and then we can get on with stuff that we align with, and that makes us both happy together. Because you're a top, you don't want to do shit to somebody that they really don't
No,
like. You don't want to waste your time. You'll feel like an idiot afterwards. Like, I'd much rather you had enough gumption to say to me, hey, Miss K, stop that, or red, or whatever words you want to use. It doesn't have to be smoke signals. I'm quite happy for you to say, hell no, I'm not going there, stop. Like, that's also fine. It gives me the information that means that we can align our path. It's a little bit like not calling red is a little bit like the guy who doesn't want to stop and ask for directions and keeps getting more and more and more lost. Like I don't want to be lost. I want to be found. I want to be in the right place. I want to be going in the right direction. So yeah, so I think it's sad that people feel like it's a failure when somebody calls red, because it's actually not about you. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with your bottom, and they're a human being and they're allowed to have these opinions. So
Well, and I feel
yeah.
like there's so much pressure for bottoms not to red. It's seen as like less than, or they feel guilt. But as a top, I have never felt weird about somebody calling red. I mean, it could be for 100 reasons that has nothing to do with what I did. And I will ask them, and hopefully it doesn't have anything to do with me. But there's the odd chance that, something lands where it shouldn't, and that's on us. But for the most part, the fact that bottoms have this conception that they cannot tell us that stuff puts us in a very weird position.
Super weird. And
Super weird.
super weird. And I'll tell you, because I bottom quite a lot. I bottom for impact quite a lot. I bottom for blood play, and I bottom for needles. Like, when I've had enough, I've had enough. It has nothing to do with the top. It has nothing to do, generally, it has nothing to do with the situation. My head only stays in a space for a certain amount of time. And once my head's checked out, I don't want to carry on because it doesn't feel the same. And I don't want to be there anymore. And it's not that I don't want to be with that person. I just don't want that person hitting me at that point, and that's okay. Like, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It's got nothing to do with the human being that's on the other side. Most of the time it's got to do with me, and my head's just gone to another space. And I think if we were, but I think so I have a practice in my dungeon, and I think this comes down to how we trained in society. We're trained to be okay all the time. We're trained to be fine all the time. We're trained to say yes all the time. So we're never checking in with ourselves. We're always giving people the answer that they want to hear, and we don't use the word no. So the word no, the word red, all of those things become a failure, and they become something that is not reachable. So with my novice classes at home, with new community, we play the yes and no game until no has no effect on another person. Because if I ask you for 2 minutes to answer no to every question I say to you, by the time those 2 minutes are up, you've said no 30 times. You feel super comfortable saying no. I feel super comfortable hearing your no. Like, I'm not offended by it. It is not personal. It's the only thing you're allowed to say in the situation. And that means that you are more confident going into a scene, being able to use that voice. But that voice is super important. And this is like, we do this for pleasure. So, and for our own pleasure, not for somebody else's pleasure. So it's super important that we are taking personal responsibility with our voice. I think that is very interesting.
Yeah, I play fairly heavy, and I need that. Like, I need to know this is something you're okay with. I just do. I might not need to know everything about why you're okay with it or why you enjoy it or da 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 da, but I need to know this is pleasurable in some way.
And you need to be able to trust that. And I
Yeah.
think for me, because I also play fairly heavy, for me to continue playing with somebody, I need to trust that they're able to tell me when they don't like something, and they're not just giving me the answer I want to hear. Otherwise, it's not an ethical situation. Then that comes down to, like, I think I spoke to you about it in the beginning. I didn't quite understand personal responsibility until I bottomed for fire, and realized that not using my voice in a situation could mean that I go to hospital with a 3rd-degree burn. My top can't guess that it's too hot for me. My top is never going to know that this is what I'm experiencing unless I tell them. If I tell them and they don't react to it, that's
Right.
on them. But if I don't say anything, it is my personal responsibility to take to take action in that moment and use my voice. And I had never felt it until I felt fire on my skin. And slightly
It
terrifying.
felt really real.
Very real.
Very real the first time that fire hits you, for sure.
Wow. Also, like African kitten, I didn't choose the smallest element, managed to burn all the hair off my arm. Nobody was topping me. I was topping myself. It was just an experiment. But sort of realized at that point that I was completely in control of my destiny, and I was the only one that was going to look after myself in the situation. And I think that's so important. And I think the good players that I have are the players that can check in with me in the morning and say to me, I'm 5 out of 10 today, I'm not playing. And not lie to me and say to me, I'm okay, show up, let me do the session. And then the session doesn't have the same effect for either of us because they don't have the capacity to be there. So I think that the more you go up, the more capacity matters. Being able to look at your capacity budget and say, can I spend this today and still ethically adult on a Monday morning? Do I have this available extra / fund to spend on kink? And those are the people I want to play with, because those are the people that are showing up ethically. And they're not putting me in a risk by doing that because they have the capacity for the situation. So yeah, I love people that will use their voice. So you can top from the bottom 100% in my dungeon. I will brat back to you. I am 100% willing to hear your voice. And I never want people to be too scared to talk to me. I would hate that. That would be more of an insult for me.
Oh, absolutely. We have a part of our dynamic too. We call it pulling the sub card. And if if my sub feels like I'm too frazzled, I have a busy life, I have too much going on, and I'm like, we should scene tonight, they'll pull the sub card and be like, no, and we'll shut it down. And you need to have people in your life that can do that. I know a lot of tops would feel that that's a weird shift in power dynamic, but this person knows me better than anyone else. And if they're saying, no, you can't do this, I'm going to go ahead and believe that I probably can't do this.
Yeah. But I think that's also, I think that you have to show up as ethical humans first. And I would hope that my friends would be ethical enough to say to me, we're not doing this today because, and not push me to the point where they would play the, oh, I'm so disappointed that we can't do this today. Because I think that is manipulation, and I don't have any of that. So, I'm really lucky that if everybody's having a shit day, we'll generally just get together, eat a lot of cake, and talk crap for 3 hours instead of throw any needles. So it's we haven't lost anything. It's not the Olympics. We don't have to jump it. We don't have to sprint over it. We don't have to go through the finish today. There's always another day to do it. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think though, when you come into the community, especially, and I hate to generalize, but especially women and slightly older women in my community don't have a voice. So I really would love them to feel that kink empowers you. This is your fucking fantasy. Make it your own, and use your voice to get there. Yeah.
So when I started in the lifestyle, I knew I liked pain and I identified as a sadomasochist. But because I was young and because I was female, I was told I was submissive.
Right.
Even though I'm not in any way, doesn't do a thing for me. I like the pain though. And I feel like that's so hard because I think a lot of young people, not just women, but of course women, get these labels thrown on them very early too, of like, this is what a sub is, this is what it should look like. Don't call red. This is, all these weird rules that I don't know who's making them up, but we all kind of heard of them, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel bad because we still see that even in big communities, those labels getting thrown on people or the expectation that they fit some kind of box.
And I think some boxes are cooler than other boxes. So you tend to gravitate towards the boxes that society thinks are cooler. I'm sure the leather community is going to disagree with me very strongly at this point, but I love the fact that there are 5,000 roles on FitLife now. I think that's fantastic. I love the fact that you can choose to be a fucking raccoon with a small R. I think that is bucket list amazing. And I really do, because literally what they're saying is this is your fantasy. You don't have to fit one of 4 boxes. You don't have to choose. You can choose to be an exploring raccoon with a small R. You can't be a raccoon with a big R. That's not a thing yet.
There's
You
no
can't do
dominant
that.
raccoon.
No dominant raccoons, only a submissive raccoon. But you know, like literally, like, and the reality is we're laughing about it, but this is fantasy. And without being able to be exploring, and a lot of people don't want to be exploring because it's not cool, or it's not accepted as cool. Like, it's much more accepted to be a slave or a submissive than it is to be a bottom in a community, like, or an exploring bottom, or just a sadomasochist. And even the title sadomasochist is terrifying, because you're now letting the world know that you like pain. I think that takes a while in your journey before you really want to acknowledge that, you know, you dream about Saw movies, and you want to try that for your next birthday adventure. Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, like I said, we see roles like I think needle top was not even added that long ago. And I remember being like, oh my God, I'm seen. Like my people, like that's amazing, you know? But I think community wise, there is this like, I don't know, 5 or 6 roles that we see repeat over and over, right? Submissive, dominant. And then we're not seeing people being able to explore those smaller fringe things that I'm sure if they had the exposure might be really interested in.
Well, you join a WhatsApp group in my community, and they'll be like, are you a dominant or a submissive? I'm neither. I'm a
You're like,
sadomasochist.
neither. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm neither. And automatically, every man over the age of 40 that's on that group stops talking to you as a female if you don't
Oh,
apply the submissive role when you enter the room. Like, it's like automatically assumed that you are now not worthy of conversation. And I used to find that quite offensive. Like, it used to worry me a little bit. And now it's great, because now I know the people that are worth spending time talking to, and the people that I'm really wasting my time spending time talking to. The people that have already put me in a box as a kink dispenser, and the people that are honestly there to share experiences. But I think that is mileage in the community. And I think we intrinsically don't want to stand out. We always want to fit in wherever we go. So it's just sometimes easier to assume the sub role and say yes and do the thing. And I think that's a lot of where the consent violation comes in, because at the beginning we violated our own consent by submitting when we didn't actually really consent to doing that in the first place.
right. And I mean, I know there's arguments for like CNC or people who have types of play where there isn't necessarily a no, right? But I would still want to have some outline with that partner. You know what I mean? Even if they're saying, oh, I don't really like needles, which I've had happen. I have a bottom who doesn't really like them, but they offered because they wanted to try it and they know I do it, right? I know going into that this is not their top priority or your favorite thing, but I respect that they're making that choice and they're communicating those things and still willing to do it.
Yeah. Oh, I've had a great chat. I really have. And I really thank you for going down the rabbit hole with me, and just being willing to to explore and let us go where our heads have taken us. And I can't wait to have you teach a class for us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing for us for Summer of Stabs?
Yeah, so I'll be teaching the art of safe and consensual blood play. It is basically your everything. We're going to start with just health stuff, negotiation, types of blood play. I think a lot of people don't realize what blood play even encompasses, right? Um, and hopefully by the end, students should be able to pick up play. They should be able to understand how to clean their areas, what disinfectants to use, risk mitigation for each different types of play I'll cover. Um, just really like the crash course on we're going to do blood play.
I love that. You had me at the title. Like, I'm always in for anything with blood, so super looking forward to that. But always amazing to hear other people's perspectives, and even just in this chat, you filled my head with impact over needles. So that's definitely now on my bucket list. It wasn't an hour ago. It definitely is on my bucket list. So I'm going to explore that a little bit and can't wait for your class. And again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Kitten.
And for all my listeners, Summer of Stabs is heating up, guys. It's getting bloody and it's getting gory, and we are embracing the horror theme like you have no idea. If you haven't heard our horror meditations, I don't know what you're doing with your lives. They're just amazing. But we hope that you are enjoying the 80s horror theme with us. We hope that you have seen that our early bird tickets have dropped for Nightfall, and that you have got an early bird ticket. And if you don't have an early bird ticket, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I know the presenter list for Nightfall. I can't tell you who's on the presenter list for Nightfall, but all I can tell you is that you really want to have a ticket for Nightfall, because it is epic and the stuff is just bucket list, and I'm so excited. And I will get into big trouble, so I'm not going to tell you anything more than that. As always, if you need a scholarship or a sponsorship or you need help, we believe education should be for everybody, and we want you to reach out to us and send us a message. We're really super happy to help anybody that is committed to the Sharps process and wants to learn more and be safe. And we don't believe that price should be a barrier for education. We hope that you are coming to our Summer of Stabs classes. We hope that you are sharing your Sharp love with your Sharp family. Tag us. We want to help and support you. We want to love your pictures, and we want the community to love you back. And most of all, we just hope that you're having a bloody good time. And from my dungeon in very cold but sunny South Africa at the moment, lots of love and kitten kisses.